All right, so this is the 10-10 Intro to Basic Grammar. I know that one or two of you have heard some of this presentation before, but I want to give it nonetheless. So what I want you to do is just kind of flow this lecture, but all the time I want you to be paying particular attention to some of the observations that I will have made on your papers possibly about the issue of grammar. So let's talk real quickly now about issues of grammar or syntax. Sometimes this is the term that's used, which is why I'll throw it up on the whiteboard. All we mean when we use this term is the rules of spoken and written language, okay? And there's actually two forms of grammars. There's what we call informal, and there's what we call formal, okay? Informal grammar, grammar that's used within very specific groups of people, okay? And this one changes all the time. It's very amorphous. It changes all the time. It's always, kind of moving in and out. So, for example, if a group of students are talking and I walk up to them and I know that something that they're saying is good to them, and I go, groovy, they might laugh about this, they know what I'm saying, right? But something's wrong with what I just said. Groovy, of course, it's a fair question to ask, where did groovy go? And why is it that, for example, in high school halls of 1960s, you heard the word groovy all the time, then the word became cool, then it became awesome, and then who knows what it is now, okay? So that's informal grammar. Formal grammar, however, is often what we will refer to as academic grammar or rules, okay? Remember the word rules is when we use this term grammar, that's what we mean. Academic grammar, this one has to do with the larger group. And this one does not change so much, okay? Does not change so much over time, all right? In other words, we have a term for this. We call it standard, all right? When we talk about standard grammar. So, here's the thing. You can use the term ain't. I ain't gonna go do that. And somebody says, uh-oh, you didn't speak grammatically correct. Or grammatically correctly. And the truth of the matter is, well, you're just using an informal grammar when you use a word like ain't, okay? When you're working with a formal audience, you want to pay particular attention then to this thing of formal grammar, all right? Now, I know that you're working with all these different kinds of rules about formal grammar in your text. What I want to do now is I want to concentrate especially on the written grammar rules. See, here's the thing. When you speak, you don't use periods. Think about what I just said. When you speak, you don't use periods. So when you speak, you can speak in incomplete sentences. It's not a big deal. Got me? But when you write academically, then you are required, the standards of conventional standards of grammar or syntax require that you have some sense of what's going on when you're writing written language. So let's talk now about what that's all about. Written grammar. And what I'll do is I'll kind of talk about the most important rules, especially the ones that I'm seeing that a number of you are committing. And after my presentation, some of my notes on your papers will make more sense. So for example, right now you might say NAS, and you don't really know what that means, but you will by the end of the presentation, okay, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. All right, let's talk real quickly. First of all, written grammar in the English language, it's actually a pretty simple, fundamentally, it's a pretty simple kind of grammar. The first thing has to do with the notion of the sentence, okay? And this is key, the idea of the sentence. Now, when we're writing, it's two things. First of all, the way it looks, and then secondly, what we'll say, the way it reads, okay? Now, what do we mean by the way it looks? Well, the way it looks is, when you're writing, now again, some of you say, dude, I don't do this when I text or when I email. Right, but that's an informal grammar, right? When you text and email, that's informal grammar. So you can do all kinds of crazy things when you're doing informal grammar. You can use the letter U to reference, for example, YOU. We do that kind of things. We can abbreviate that. We're not allowed to do that in standard grammar, though, however, okay? So when we talk about a sentence and you're writing it, there has to be some notion of a capital letter, I'll just put a T there. Then there's some words in between, and then there's in punctuation of some kind. It can either be a period, an exclamation mark, or a question mark. And then the assumption is that whatever happens between that capital letter and that in punctuation is a sentence. That's what we mean by the way it looks. Okay? Got me? The second is in regards to how it reads. All right? And here, the way we say this is, in the English language, you've got to have what we call two parts of a sentence. Two parts of a sentence. Okay? And there's different ways this gets taught. I like to teach it in a very simple language, so that way it sticks in our brain. Basically, for it to be a sentence in the English language, you have to have some thing doing something. Okay? Something doing something. All right? Now, what do we mean by that? Well, first of all, let's put a square around the word thing. Of course, if you remember from your early grammar days, we call this thing sometimes a what? Noun. A noun. We'll also sometimes refer to it as a subject, okay? But some of you will say, wait a minute, I thought they said a noun was a person, a place, or a thing, and I'll often point out, well, isn't a person a thing, and isn't a place a thing, and isn't a thing a thing? Let's just call it a thing. You got to have something, all right? But it is not enough that you have a thing. We'll go ahead and circle now the word doing. You must have the second part, which is why we say that there's two parts to the English formal grammar. This doing we often refer to as a what? As a verb. What's the other fancy $5 word for it? Starts with a P. Does anyone know? You've got to have your subject, that's your thing, and then there's this P word. Predicate. Very good. Predicate, right? All right, and that predicate is the action. Right? The action. Correct? So even though it's, early June and it was our hottest day of the year so far, etc., I'll write the term, the sentence, over the river and through the woods, period. To grandmother's house we go, and on it goes, right? Well, wait a minute. Check this out. This looks like a sentence. This looks like a sentence. I got a capital, I got a series of words, I got in punctuation. Correct? Right? It looks like a sentence. But this is NAS, which means what? Not a sentence. Right, not a sentence. Now, why is this not a sentence? Well, let's ask the simple question. Do I have a thing in this string of words? Sure I do. A river is a thing. And woods is a thing. Remember, a thing is anything you could see, touch, taste, feel, etc. Okay, so that's a thing. So I definitely have a river and I definitely have woods in the sentence. But the question is, for it to be a sentence in the formal grammar of the English language, it must be doing something. So it's a simple question. Is the river doing anything? And don't tell me rivers flow, because that's not what this sentence says. And are the woods doing it? Woods aren't doing anything either. Because I have no predicate here, I've got no action, I've got no verb, I've got no sentence. Do you got me? So the first thing that you'll want to put in your notes, and this is really important as college writers, profs, if they discover this, they jack your scores badly. For example, I have colleagues, if I wrote NAS on your paper one time, I already have colleagues that are giving that paper a 50% for one infraction to this rule. Got me? So let's make a suggestion that as we go through the proofing editing phase, one of the recommendations I make for you is that you print your papers at double or triple space, take out a red ink pen, and above each sentence, that looks like a sentence in your paper, above each subject put an S, and above each predicate put a verb, V. And if you don't have both of these, for example, over the river and through the woods, you can kind of do this. Oh, there's two subjects there. I got two things, two nouns. Wait a minute. What is it in the sentence the river is doing? Nothing. What's nothing? I don't have a sentence. Right. So don't rely on your grammar check of Microsoft Word. Don't rely on your grammar check to always find these kinds of mistakes, because a lot of times it isn't going to find them. Do you got me? So it's crucial that you kind of think about this one. Okay? Believe it or not, I'm halfway done with my lecture already in terms of grammar rules. I told you, it's not, this is 80% of the problem of college writers right here. They write without using proper syntax or proper grammar in terms of sentences. There's a second major problem, and it has to do with this thing. Sometimes the language I often will use when I discuss this is, sometimes this thing is what we call fuzzy. I don't mean fuzzy like in with hair on it, fuzzy. I mean fuzzy as in what? Unclear. All right? Unclear. And the game I'll often play when I give this presentation is, for example, I'll play it with Barker. I appreciate it. She'll play along. Hey, Barker, would you please give me that? Let's do this, by the way, Barker.
Okay, all right.
Give me that. I'm serious, Barker. Give me that. See, here's the thing. Barker knows I'm talking about a thing, right? When I say, give me that. But she doesn't know what I'm talking about, right? Or, for example, I could say to Lockhart, man, isn't he stunning? By the way, do you think he is? See, here's the problem for Barker. She knows that I'm talking about a thing, and I'm saying about that thing that it's a he and that he's stunning, right? And it's, you know, it's hard for Lockhart. She's like, well, look, I mean, you know, there's one or two of the he's that maybe are saying, there's a whole lot that aren't. Okay, and we will get into it, right? Of course, we can often, isn't she like a whack job? Here's the problem. It's like she who. I mean, you know, it all depends on who we're talking. See what I'm saying? These words, and many like them, we call what in formal grammar? Do you remember? What do we call these words? We call them fuzzy. I call them fuzzy words simply because they're unclear, right? It's unclear. Barker, hey Barker, give me that. She knows I'm talking about a thing, but she just doesn't know what. What is the formal language? What are we talking about when in grammar? These words are what? What do we call pronouns? Okay, pronouns. Got me? Now these pronouns can create serious problems for college writers in a number of ways. We have a simple rule. You want to write it down. The rule is simply this. You never use the pronoun until you first use what's called the antecedent. Now, if you write that word down and then put a square around the first four letters of that word, ante, A-N-T-E, ante simply means that which comes before. Okay? That which comes before. So we have a rule. You always use the thing. Hey, Barker, nice glass with a straw coming out the top. Give me that. Once I've used the thing or the antecedent, that which comes before, now I can use the pronoun. But I never use the pronoun until I've used the antecedent first. Got me? It's a very important rule. Rule number 2. We always make sure we never use these pronoun words in the first sentence of paragraphs. Never. We stay away from them. So, for example, if I'm writing a paper about my grandma, and I start a paragraph and I say, she is the most amazing woman. Whoa, whoa, whoa. She who? Ah. Now see what I've done is I've used a pronoun without an antecedent. Dude, the whole paper is about my grandma. The reader's going to know. I understand, but follow. We're talking about grammar rules that are formal. Another way to say this is you can't play the game unless you know the rules. Profs will jack you for not following the rules. Understood? So one of the rules is we never use these pronouns in the first sentence of paragraphs. Always use the antecedent, my grandma, and then for the rest of that paragraph, I can use she. Got me? And then when I start a new paragraph, I start over again. Got me? Makes sense? To avoid confusion. And by the way, that's one of the reasons for our grammar rules, to avoid confusion within the academic community. Remember our earlier lecture about the academic community? So we kind of have a rule here about that. Make sense? Finally, rule number 3 about pronouns. This is an important one. You want to stay away from the pronoun I and the pronoun you or other kinds of plural pronouns like we. Okay? You want to stay away from those. Yeah, that's an important one. That's an important one. Here's the deal. I think it's really important to know about politics. I write that in my paragraph, in my essay. I think it's really important to know about politics. Wait a minute. Whose name is at the top in the login information on your paper? Yours. Well, then why do you need to say I think? It's fairly self-evident that you're the one writing the paper. There's no point in saying, I think. Just say what you think. It's important to know politics. You don't have to say, I think. You're the one writing the bloody paper. Make sense? Okay? Now, there are exceptions to all these rules, obviously. For example, in the reflective essay that you're working on, where you're writing about an experience that happened to you, then obviously you are free to use the first person pronoun. I mean, you're writing about a specific event that happened in your life. So in other words, you don't have to try and shy away from saying my grandma or my life or this experience of mine. You don't have to worry about it. Makes sense? Okay. But the pronoun you, we really try and stay away from in academic papers, and here's why. Hello, when you're writing a paper in a 1020 lit class on Hamlet, who are you writing the paper for? Well, who's going to read it? Well, that person's called a prof. And there's no reason in saying you should read Hamlet. I mean, let's assume the 1020 profs read the play once, maybe twice, okay? So we try and stay away from this. This, by the way, is what we will often refer to as simply informal grammar, and we kind of stay away from it, okay? So before you hit the print key for the final time, another suggestion here in terms of editing, you probably want to take a look at these pronouns. Now, there's one other issue of pronoun, what we call agreement. Okay, agreement issues. Can I just put that right here on this? Now I'm working on this part of the board. I apologize. I got to go all over my board here to give this lecture. I apologize. Agreement. Okay, watch this. Now, I must say this out loud. I don't mean to insult. But because we live out here in the West, this is tough for us, okay? Because this is the difference between the way we talk and the way we're supposed to write. So, for example, watch this. This could never happen in our class, okay? Everyone forgot their homework. Like I said, never happened, Mark. Never happened. But, okay, I'll use this example. Now, here's the problem. There are profs at the University of Wyoming that if you wrote this sentence in your paper, you immediately got a 50% on your paper. What? First of all, let's point out something. Everyone forgot their homework. You understand what that means, right? So this isn't an issue of confusion about meaning, right? But we've got a grammatical mistake here, which is again part of the formal rules of grammar. And the problem here is a pronoun issue with agreement. Watch my whiteboard. Everyone. Singular, one, or plural, more than one. Well, if it says one, it's fairly clear. It's singular. Right? Mm-hmm. There, singular or plural? Plural. This is plural. This ain't singular, is it? Right? You guys just said, well, he's giving a lecture on grammar and he just used the word ain't to say this ain't. But remember, I'm giving a lecture to you guys and this is fairly informal in my presentation. Right? Okay? This is a big dog deal for a lot of profs. I'm telling you now. There are history profs who if you do this one time, they'll jack your paper to 30%. I promise you. I know I've seen it done. Okay? They take this very personal. What about if I were to change it to everybody? Maybe that changes everything. Everybody forgot their homework. We say it like this all the time, correct? But wait a minute. Body is still one, singular. Right? Okay? So, for example, an easy way to... I had a student once who said, this just doesn't make sense to me, though. Can you give me a way so that I can lock it in my brain and it would make sense? Well, watch this sentence. I'm gonna put another singular noun there, only I'm going to say student. Now read the sentence. Student forgot their homework. See, it don't make no sense, does it? Right? You have a tendency to kind of give that funny look, like, see, that don't make no sense. Student is singular, one. Everybody is singular, one. Everyone is singular, one. The only problem is we speak this and this. This makes us sound like we're some kind of foreign student from Russia learning English or something to say student forgot their homework, correct? Now, if you're going to stick with a singular pronoun, then you have to have your other pronoun be singular as well. And the classic example of this is to simply use his or her. Okay? In the old days, we just used the masculine his Okay? But after the 70s in the academic community, we started to become more politically correct. And we wanted our language to be gender inclusive. That means both guys as well as girls get their fair due. So what we would do then is we would use his or her. By the way, if you hear someone either spoken or written say, everyone forgot his or her homework, you immediately know that individual has been well educated. By the way, did you notice that I could have said it differently? If you hear someone speak and say, everyone forgot his or her notebook, you immediately know that they have been well trained. Did you see that? Watch that. Watch out. If you hear blah 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 blah, you immediately know that they have been well educated. That is a plural pronoun, right? Mm-hmm. They, more than one. We do this all the time in spoken language. Okay, so it's extreme because I was talking about. Notice I said if you hear a person. One, singular. If you hear a person say, everyone forgot his or her, that's singular. That means they have been well, Now, I know we do this when we speak informally all the time, and go ahead and keep doing it. In fact, there are places and people in Wyoming, especially, that if you say his or her, they're like, dude, what is wrong with you? Why don't you talk normal like? See, okay? But when you write within the academic community, it is crucial you understand these rules. Okay? That's what we call agreement, and a lot of times just out in the margin, I'll just simply point out you got an agreement issue. What that means is your pronouns are not matching up in terms of singular, plural. That's why we call it agreement. Everybody groovy with that? All right, our last bit of information here. I'll get our board a little bit clearer so I can do this. Go ahead and write down. This is what we call fragment work. Okay, fragment work. Other examples of what we would call not full sentences. All right. Now again, this is going to be problematic for some of us, and what I'm about to talk about here now is probably one of the biggest problems of college writers. Okay. Let's get romantic, shall we? The stars were shining, the moon was bright. Isn't that sweet, Lockhart? Okay, and I won't get into any more details about who was with who. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Check this out. You've got what looks like a full sentence. You've got a capital letter. You got a bunch of words in between. You have end punctuation. The only problem is it's not a sentence. What? Now, again, let's point out. It's not like we don't know what this means. The stars were shining, the moon was bright. We get it. We know what it means. But grammatically, there's something wrong here. What is wrong here? Well, I've got two sentences. The stars were shining is a full sentence. Something doing something. Correct? The moon was bright. Full sentence. Again, something doing something. Correct? I've joined those two sentences together without any punctuation. Nothing in between. We call that what? A what? Run-on sentence. Dude, I thought a run-on sentence is like a sentence that went on and on and on for a long time. Dude, does that look like a long sentence to you? It's not long. The rules of a run-on sentence are simple. You join two, I'll give you the formula. So it makes it sound like I'm really smart. English teachers like to sound like they're really smart. The joining of two independent clauses together without adequate punctuation. Really? You put two sentences together without anything joining them, okay? So, nothing there. Got me? Nothing there. So I know I'll fix the problem because the stars were shining, the moon was bright. I'll fix the problem by putting a comma there. The stars were shining, comma, the moon was bright. Hurrah, now I fixed my problem, right? Lockhart goes, no, still not a sentence. What? Yep, not a sentence. What do we call this? When you join two complete sentences together with only, underline the word, only a comma, what do we call that? No, the grammatical errors call it comma splice. Okay? Comma splice. A comma splice is the joining of two independent clauses together with only a comma. Okay? Now, there's three ways basically you can fix this problem. The stars were shining, period. Capital T, the moon was bright. Make it two sentences. If you want to join the two sentences together, one way to do it is to put a little period above that comma, that we call a semicolon, and now grammatically it's okay. Okay? That's another way to do it. Or I can stick with the comma, but after the comma, I'm going to use what's called a conjunction. The stars were shining, comma, and the moon was bright, period. Now I'm fine. Okay? Stylistically, there's all kinds of issues involved here that we want, to pay attention to. You don't want to overuse the semicolon, for example. Okay, that's not a good idea. You try not to have, as our guy on our videos keeps telling us, you don't want to have a lot of short, choppy sentences. The stars were shining, period. The moon was bright, new sentence. So the use of the conjunction, coordinating conjunction is what it's called. It brings together two sentences. Not a bad idea. Okay? Finally, when you get ready to edit, I recommend some kind of a model of an upside-down pyramid. The first thing that you want to look at are just your basic sentences in terms of subject, predicate, agreement. Okay? Subject, verbs, making sure that you've actually got subjects and verbs. After that, I recommend that you do another sweep. That means you just go through the paper looking. Sweep, look for pronouns, okay? Follow your pronoun usages. Look for antecedents being used in first sentences of pronouns. Make sure you don't use I or you in your paper unless it's allowed. And of course, look for this agreement issue, as we talked about it, everyone forgot their homework, that kind of thing. Then finally, concentrate on issues of words themselves. For example, there is a difference between they are contraction, there, and T-H-E-I-R. Are you ready for this? Most of your grammar checkers don't catch this stuff. They're not sophisticated enough to catch this. Got me? Okay? So you want to kind of stay away from those kinds of mistakes as well. All right. Questions, comments? All right, I did that right in a half an hour, so I should be given a Scooby snack for that. Any questions about any of that? Go, Locke.
When you're talking about pronouns,
yes.
What if you're asking like a question in the beginning of your paper to like if you're asking like, have you ever?
Now you're asking about the use of the second person pronoun. There, it's kind of considered stylistically often acceptable, right? It's usually acceptable. Most profs are not going to jack you for that. Although sometimes profs will get kind of tacky with you and write in a margin, are you asking me if I've ever done this? Then you go, okay, I've got a hardcore. Let's stay away from any kind of introductory question where I ask the prof a question. Okay. And to some degree, you have to learn how to be a little bit kind of able to evolve with your prof and kind of, what is it that the prof wants? What's accepted, what's not accepted, etc. So, okay. All right, let's go to work now, and we'll talk a little bit about the